Hello and welcome back to another installment of Form Follows Theology on my news podcast feed. It has been a long time, but honestly, y'all, life was lifing, and I had to take a little bit of time. But we're back now, and while I can't promise, a specific frequency, I wanted to do these weekly before, but I started a new job, still doing school, so I can't, promise any specific kind of cadence. I can promise that there will be regularity. These will be dropping more than once every couple of months. So I can promise regularity. But yeah, this is Form Follows Theology episode 2 again. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about Joseph and the coat of many colors, or the coat with long sleeves, depending on who you ask. So let's get into it. So, something that's really important to me is biblical stories, specifically in the Old Testament. They get burned into our minds through what I would call a very popular lens. And it's useful because it helps us retain general information and principles, which ultimately speaking, if you were to ask me, is uh, largely the point. And that's mostly because you are telling this to children. But unfortunately, this leads to some inaccurate tellings of biblical events. And these stories become for many Christians exactly that. They're just stories. They've been smoothed over, edited, condensed for our minds as children, or for, quite frankly, those of us that don't feel like studying, so that we can say we know a story, or so that we can say, yeah, I'm engaging in the Bible. And, you know, I want to throw out as a disclaimer that while I do my own studying for, some things like this whole thing is me finding things that I find interesting and learning a little bit more about it, and then sharing with y'all how it's impacted me through a lens of theology and fashion. And that said, while I do study for this is not a study. So please, don't no, hopefully no one says anything like, "Oh, well, that's not technically what that was going for." What I mean. I'm really here as an exploration of mining the depths of what the Bible could possibly have to say. Because on the positive side of being stories is that we get to infer things based on the events. I'm a big Jordan Poole, sorry, NBA on the brain. I'm a big Jordan Peele fan, and there's a scene in his movie Get Out where the woman, I believe her name was Jordan too, or no, Rose. Sorry, where Rose is after the whole reveal. I guess spoilers, but whatever. If you haven't seen it at this point, Rose is eating Fruit Loops and milk, but she has a glass of milk on the side. There's no milk in the bowl of cereal, and she's eating some Fruit Loops and then drinking a sip of milk. And when he was doing an interview about it later on, people were saying, "Oh yeah, it's brilliant because uh, she wasn't mixing the colored Fruit Loops with the white milk. It's all an allegory for her need to control and their need to control and separate the interactions between white and colored people, which I don't, first of all, I don't know why I'm saying colored. I feel like I'm in the friggin' 1960s, but like, I mean, people of color. Um, and Jordan Peele was like, "Oh, that's actually a really dope idea. I just did it because uh, it was weird. Like no one does that, or no one should do that." And I mean, I just wanted to show that she's a really weird person. And while that wasn't exactly Jordan Peele's intention, in fact, was not Jordan Peele's intention, I do think that it adds a layer of depth that those people saw that, and retained that information. It was a key insight into Rose's character that wasn't necessarily intended at that point, but it did offer some depth. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about here, where it may have been intentional, it may not have been intentional, but either way, there have been some depth mined from it, and hopefully we can reflect on truths that come out of this kind of exploration of fashion-related theology, and be edified from it, and hopefully grow in your interest in fashion or history or theology or whatever. That's what it's all here for. So, at the top of this, we said that we're going over Joseph in a coat of many colors. And I just want to dive straight into it. Honestly, the coat is one of the hallmarks of Joseph's story. And upon rereading it and thinking about it, I was realizing that the Joseph in the coat of many colors, if he was alive today, his dad would have simply just given him a camel colored overcoat. And that's not a coat of many colors, but you got to hear it out. Joseph and his brothers and the Israelites were around in this peninsula and heading him into west into Egypt, where he would eventually be. And people, if you did not know, who are around this area are brown. And as a darker person myself, I realized this man Joseph was simply stunting on his brothers in that that real basic, but let me not say basic because I don't want to hate, but he was stunting on his brothers in the tried and true turtleneck, camel overcoat, and Chelsea boot fit combo. And you cannot forget the thin gold chain along with that. I realized that Joseph's brothers were hating because he was a black man in drip. And the man never wants to see you succeed. Always keep your third eye open, my brothers. But anyway, it's one of the most popular. Joseph is one of the most popular and influential figures in the book of Genesis, honestly. And in most tellings of the story, the coat is really just used as a literary device to convey, Jacob's favoritism towards Joseph, or it is the kind of physical token that we attach the brothers' feelings of jealousy toward Joseph to. And I think, for the most part, that is the intended usage. Those are intended usages of, the coat of many colors. So it does symbolize those things. But as a quick history lesson, so that we all understand, it's easy to think now, why would his brothers be jealous of a coat with a lot of colors? That doesn't make sense. That wouldn't make sense to our modern brain. But you got to remember, at this point in time, there was not, modern textile manufacturing as we know it. And a lot of the dyes that we have right now are manufactured, are artificial. And the ones that we did make from natural materials at this time would have had to been made by hand, and it would have taken a lot of skill, a lot of time, and a lot of material. So certain colors that we associate with royalty now, red, purple, things that were very hard to find in nature, they were reserved for people with power or money because they were hard to get and thus were very expensive. So when you have something that is multicolored, a skilled craftsman had to make this piece. And Jacob had to pay a lot of money to have this piece made. And he had to get it made specifically for Joseph. And because of these factors, there is an element to this coat that he's getting, this garment that he's getting, that is royal. It has a royal air to it. When he puts that coat on and he's telling his brothers, I saw y'all bow down to me. It is not simply the silly dream of a boy who maybe shouldn't have told his brothers a dream. While that's true, he is physically wearing a piece of clothing that would signify to anyone that saw him that I am of a royal or priestly status. I am important. He had a piece of clothing on, and you remember in the clothing and rings and things of this nature are physical signs to people of who you are. In the story of the prodigal son, when the son comes back, the father tells him to bring a new coat, and he tells him to he gives him his ring. He gives him his ring. He gives him a physical symbol of, this is your status. So these physical tokens are very important. We cannot overlook that. So Joseph is wearing a physical reminder to everyone who sees him and himself that I am royal, I am important, I am priestly, I am of high status. So this clothing takes on a different meaning. It would be as if someone was walking around with a crown. We don't really have many things like this in American culture, because we kind of shucked off royalty and that kind of thing. But it is, then I'm really trying to think about it, and I cannot think of a equivalent that we have. An equivalent that we have. I'm trying to think. The president doesn't really wear anything, but that, which I guess is a blessing in some senses. But it is as if you saw someone walking around with a crown, and they were like, yeah, I'm the king of whatever. So this is the kind of air that he's bringing about, and this is the kind of clothing that he's wearing. There's a declaration being made about who Joseph is, not just some silly ideas. And remember that I'm saying royal and priestly, and I'm saying that very much on purpose to hopefully remind you. It's hopefully ringing bells to you, that the Bible calls Israel and now Christians a royal priesthood. That is very, very important. There's a lot of prototypes in the Old Testament of things to come, and Joseph is one of these. And that coat that he's wearing, I believe, begins to show us some very interesting, cool pictures of things to come. If you remember, what happens to Joseph? His brothers get jealous after he tells them of his dreams. And, they band together and they say, we're going to kill him. But then Reuben steps in, saves his life, says, we'll throw him in the pit and we won't kill him, but we'll sell him. And he fully intended to come back, blah, 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 everything. Hopefully you know the story. If you don't, go and read Genesis 40, I believe is about when it starts. Someone, whatever. Anyway, if you don't know, I would highly encourage you to go read it. It's at the tail end of Genesis. And what happens is, their father, they knew that their father would need proof that Joseph had died before they sold him off. So what did they do? They tore his cloak and they put blood on it, and took it back to their father. They put, I believe it was goat blood. They put goat blood on this garment and brought it back to their father. And I believe that this is intentionally bringing about a sort of type of Jesus. If you remember, hopefully, Jesus was one who was perfect, one who came down, who did have kingly destiny in his future. Upon his birth, wise men came and gave gifts that are related to a coronation. In his youth, he's in the temple talking about, this is my father's house. And he has a ministry and a kingdom. He is our high priest, but he is also our Lord. So that, we emulate Jesus through this kind of royal priesthood that he has brought us into. And, he ushered this in. He ushered in the ability to enter this kingdom of life through his death. In a similar fashion, the quote unquote death of Joseph, evidenced in the blood and death of the royal priest, signified through his clothing. We see that eventually, through that death and that supposed death and resurrection, if I can go as far as saying that, the saving the salvation of what would become the Israelite people is found, and we can take that as a very loose type. There was a man who came and from a young age, relatively young age, knew that he was destined to bring about the salvation of his people. He knew. And he knew that the only way he could do that was by dying. And that was signified in large part due to much, much, much blood imagery around the crucifixion of Jesus, from the piercing of his side to the lashings to the Garden of Gethsemane. Blood is the life of things. But importantly, we know that through the story of Jesus and through the story of Joseph, that God is able to do the impossible. That is normally the way that at least I had heard this story of Joseph be used, as a story of God. He uses everything. He doesn't leave anything. He's able to redeem anything. And that's all so true. Through the death of one, he brought about the salvation of many. And in this case, obviously, because he's not actually our Savior, Joseph didn't really die. He didn't really resurrect. He was presumed dead and, rose up through the ranks after a series of descents into prison. And there's a whole lot there. But through that, we can see and then apply on a greater magnitude the way in which Jesus, who literally died and who literally resurrected and who was a perfect royal, and it was a perfect priest, and is a perfect royal, and is a perfect priest, that God used the life, death, resurrection for salvation. Everything in this book that we call the Bible, which I believe just means book, the book, is pointing toward Jesus. Every single thing, even a coat that is smeared in blood. So anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed that. I hope that was thought-provoking in some way for y'all. I wanted to say thank y'all. Many blessings to y'all. Bye.